This is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready. We're about to live in your head rent-free.
Hello, Otterites. This is episode 236.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
I'm Francis.
I am Marcus. And I'm Andre.
All right, Cajun is out in the wilds of Nelson County with us. We miss him not being here because this is one of his favorite episodes. I'm so stunned that he missed this one.
The details are sketchy, but apparently there's been some kind of medication mishap, and he can't drive a car.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
There's a certain thing in
Appendages are in the way.
Yeah, they can't steer.
Oh, no.
Something about 4 hours or more and go to the hospital.
Yeah.
You guys are just amazing. This is how we pulled that off.
Yes, he seemed rather dizzy on the phone, couldn't speak. It was like there was not enough oxygen getting to his brain.
Yeah, there's something with the blood flow.
Blood flow.
Yeah.
And there we go, rabbit holing right out of the gate, guys.
I heard it was a Nareltney incident.
All right. I'm supposed to be the captain of this disaster, and we've almost run aground just as we've left space dock. So this
Sorry,
is not
I
good.
had to use that because I knew that the Imperator would appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Although before we get started, I think there's
Yes.
a few call-outs.
Oh yes,
to make.
absolutely. Please go right ahead.
So first of all, Cajun's news that he gave us the last time we all gathered in Nelson County, is that for public consumption? Or is that on the down low still?
I'm going to go ahead and say public consumption. Let's roll with it.
All right, then. A hearty congratulations to Cajun and Ms., soon to be Mrs. Cajun.
That's correct.
Oh.
No dates
Oh,
have
I
been.
hadn't heard this.
Yes, no dates have been set, and it's ethereal.
put a rock on
it's
that
in the
finger.
future, but yes, he has. The
Oh,
reason I say it's okay
congratulations.
because he does refer to her as his fiancée now, so that way we're there. So that's we greet him.
Well, and he has some other career news as
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going to talk about.
Well,
Yeah.
start with the important one.
Yeah.
Very good, very good.
Yeah, so, yes, but also the first book that he has edited
Yes.
for Three Ravens Publishing has been released. I have a copy. He signed it when we were in New Haven.
I have my
at,
copy. It
Sherwood
has
Inn.
yet to be signed. Yes.
And it's called From the Trailer Park, Volume 4. And it is redneck horror stories, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best way to
It's
put it.
a short collection of
Actually, it's a pretty big collection.
Is it?
Yeah, it's,
Oh.
it's,
Yes.
it's significant. I want
There's
to say
probably
there's
24 stories in
Oh,
every
2
volume.
every
Okay.
bit of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and short stories
Good,
about
good.
5,000 words each. I did the line edits for his when he put it together. Catfish Trip is his story. He wrote under his Timothy Hardy is what he is the name that he wrote under for that. But he also gets editing credit under his real name as well. So he's got both on that.
Yes.
And I know because
And-
he's been published before. That's been several years ago. So this is kind of like his just like Elvis had his comeback special.
Yeah, this is his
And
comeback
Elvis is on the
special.
cover.
And Elvis is on the cover. That's why I did that.
Right,
Yeah, it's
right.
because it's
Right, and you said this was Three Ravens.
yeah, Three
Three
Raven
Ravens
Publishing.
Publishing.
That's
Publishing.
correct.
Yes, headed up by Hillbilly, a gentleman we met
William Joseph Roberts.
at,
Yes.
at Imaginarium. And he just developed a working relationship with Hillbilly over the last year or so.
Yeah.
And he got this. And now apparently the next volume, Volume 5, or a special holiday one, I don't think it's been decided yet,
Yeah.
has it?
No, there's talk of one. There will be one. There'll be
Right.
several. Yeah.
Right. But anyways, the next volume, Cajun will get to edit entirely on his own.
Yes. And it's
So-
always published around Halloween.
Yes.
But he's been pushing for a holiday like it's in Christmas holiday.
Yes.
Which I don't think they're doing that this year because
No.
we're here there and he hasn't talked about that.
Right. Well, that's too close to the Halloween release
And
date.
and therein lies the issue too.
Yeah.
So they just dropped the other one. But hey, it's available on all major platforms.
It is. I
So-
bought a ebook as well as the hard copy.
Yep.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, available on Amazon. It came from the Trailer Park, Volume 4.
Yes.
right, so-
highly recommend you pick up all of them. I'm almost through Volume 1, and there's some really good stuff.
They are a hoot. They really are. And I've become a great admirer of the anthology method because it's such a great way to get different voices, different approaches, different things all in one volume. It's kind of like a one size fits all, the ultimate, skeleton key
Yeah.
for
Cool.
for what you do.
And, you don't see a whole lot of anthologies anymore.
No, but I talked to Hillbilly at the last thing, and I'm sure you probably did too. And that's what sells. Raconteur Press does the same thing. They sell anthologies all over the place. That's Law Dog and his group, and those things sell. People, they are coming back into appreciation.
I wonder if that's more true though at the small press level than it is at the big
and that is
publisher.
very possible. I don't think the big press folks have figured it out yet. I think that
Well,
and it-
because
it-
series are the big thing, really.
correct,
Well,
and that's
I mean,
true.
Now, I would say short story anthologies are probably more up and coming than the big thing.
Correct.
But especially when you get into ebook series, if you go Kindle Unlimited route, you need a series.
Absolutely.
You should almost really have 3 books in your pocket before you publish the first one.
And well, I mean, my discussions with Tony from Hydra Press. That's
Yes.
when we first started. When I was shopping around my first book.
Yes,
he
Tony
said,
said the same thing to me. Yes,
that's right. He said series is where it's at. You got to get four good books out there before you start seeing a return.
Yep.
But once you've built that following, people follow you and they want that next stuff. So that's for all of our up and coming authors that listen to us, and I hope there are many. That's a great way to get started.
yes,
and
yes, it is.
Well,
They're all in Singapore.
they're also
Yes, thank you.
all of our Singapore listeners.
Absolutely,
Yes,
we
yes.
love our Singapore listeners.
That's yes. There are several pieces of news to cover here. So, as of this morning, we are at 9,931 downloads.
so
I
after
checked before I
was hoping we'd hit that 10K.
I was too. I was hoping we'd hit it before the show started, but we are. If we don't hit it by the end of next week, I'd be shocked because for some reason, our downloads spike the week after the show drops, and not like at the beginning of the week, like it's Monday, people are going to get their downloads kind of thing. Because usually that's an automatic thing, but for whatever reason, it tends to spike about 6 or 7 days later, which is fine. I don't care when it spikes.
That's right.
But since Bourbon Fest, we have seen a massive uptick. I can only presume it's because we were handing out cards and talking up the show a ton.
So for all those
Yeah.
listeners that we met at Bourbon Fest, thank you very much.
Now,
Yes.
the other thing, though, is that in this last month, our biggest listening group is from Singapore.
Absolutely, yeah. Because we figure it. It tells us.
Right. So, as far as we know, until we see evidence to the contrary, not only are we number one with the Amish, prove us wrong, we are also the number one fastest growing English language podcast in Singapore.
And we invite our Singapore listeners to reach out to us because hey, email is universal.
That's
Snakes and Otters Snakes and Otters podcast
At gmail.com.
gmail.com. Make sure I get that right.
Just last week, I saw 2 different buggies with our bumper stickers on them.
Ah, there you go.
one in Indiana, in the middle of Indiana. The other one up in Ohio.
Oh, I thought you were going to say one in English and one in German.
No.
Das ist sehr gut, jawohl.
Yeah, no.
And to regress just a little bit, we mentioned all the good news of Cajun. We were in New Haven. I think a shout out goes to the Sherwood Inn,
Absolutely.
where we
yes.
met, and it was a delicious meal.
That was your first time there, I believe.
That was
yes.
first time eating there. Yes.
Yes, that's
Yes.
right. Yeah.
Yes, the Sherwood, as listeners know, is a longtime favorite of the Snakes and Otters OG.
Absolutely, that's
Yes.
right. It's been there since the 1800s. Right after the
Yes.
Civil War.
So I was trying to explain a little bit of this to Mrs. Martin. She's not been. And I noticed the menu is kind of upscaled this time.
That's
It
the
is, and it's a
intention.
little small. It's a
It's
little
small, yeah.
spare, but they're adding.
Well, and
Yeah.
I talked to Dean Johnson, who is the driving force behind it, and he had indicated as they're growing, they need to keep it simple. They need to because they're basically kind of doing this on a wing and a prayer
Yeah.
because they're having to do this on their own. Whereas before they leased the property
Right.
to a
He is
restaurant.
the building owner.
Yeah, to a restaurateur that does that for in Bardstown.
And it was they did a very fine job.
They did.
What's the restaurant they own? Because we should give them a shout out too. Because I hear it's fantastic.
Oh, it is. It's the Rick House.
The Rick House. Yes,
It's-
I knew it was bourbon.
Yeah,
themed name.
it's right there where the Bourbon Fest is. I mean, it's literally
Yes.
behind them in Spalding Hall, next to St. Joe the Pro Cathedral there. So it's they do a great job. And when we were there for their last night before they closed, and I made a promise that we would eventually get over there because they asked us to.
Right.
They said, "Yeah, come on over. We'd love to have you at the Rick House." So we'll give them a shout out too.
So, but I was trying to explain the previous menu that the Rick House people did
Right.
with this sandwich, and I wanted to have Francis
Oh, okay.
talk
yes,
about this
Yes.
sandwich. There's like a
There's a history
thing
to it. It's
to it, yeah.
Howard's ham sandwich, and it's
Howard's. That's what
That's
it was.
right. Because literally across the street from the Sherwood, the building is just about as old. It used to be Paul Howard's General Store,
and it looks like one from the outside.
and that's what it was built
Yes,
as.
it does.
And you guys might remember on our last night there, one of my old friends, Danny Vidito, bought us all
How
drinks.
could we forget?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he bought us all drinks. Well, his grandfather was Paul Howard.
Ah.
So Danny used to work there back when we were kids, as well as his brother and cousins and all stuff like that.
Anybody we walked past or talked to that night had a relative that owned some business.
Well,
along
it's
there.
just
I
it's a
mean,
small
that's-
town. It's
And
only
went to
1,000
school
people.
with Francis.
Yeah,
Yeah, and went to school with Francis.
Well, I mean,
That-
we are reaching our age of ascendancy, gentlemen. You know,
Yeah,
we're-
but tell me
that-
about the
Howard ham sandwich is because one of the things that Paul Howard's had, it was a general store. You could get your pickle
Right.
bologna, you can get your hammers, you can get anything you need. But they also had a deli behind the counter, and it was one of those places where you could go get a ham sandwich, and they would. I want to say it was Tavern Ham. I'm not sure exactly
probably,
on that.
yeah,
I
probably.
want to say it was Tavern Ham, but they would shave it very, very small, and they would make you your sandwich on white bread,
Yes.
ham.
Went to bed.
Yeah, exactly. And probably Sunbeam. That was the one that was in the
Or
area at
bunny?
the time. Along with this very thin shaved ham, and you can get it with your shaved lettuce and tomato and onion and stuff like that. And that was so famous. People would come from miles around
Right, because it's
there's nothing you can get to eat anywhere around here.
if you had a farm, then you probably had hired people to come help you work it.
Absolutely.
And then the idea is at lunchtime, if you weren't feeding them,
That's right.
then you went to the general store and you bought everybody a ham sandwich.
Well, that's kind of
So
exactly
it's
what
kind
it
of
was.
a working man's kind of
Very much so
lunch.
for that, or for anything. The guys working at the garage.
Yeah. Oh yes, yes.
Just up the street. Well,
Right.
My great uncle Cyril Head, his son has a garage that's like 6 doors up. They're in there all the time. It's just
Yes.
that's what you would do. And it became so famous all around that area of the county because there are no restaurants.
Right,
There's not
right.
anything like that, and it kind of became legend because it was so good. And that's why they picked up the name and remade the sandwich on the previous menu. And I had it that last night.
Right. That's what
I remembered
Yes.
it well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
That's
it
that's
was-
why it stuck with me that you're having that. So that's why I wanted to
And
have
and
you
it was
draw that
it was-
out.
and it was exact as I remember.
So I'm hoping they add that, are able to add that back into the menu.
That's a
at some point.
possibility. Like I say, what they've got is limited, but wow, what they had was excellent.
It was. It was just a phenomenal night. That steak was awesome.
Amen. It was. That's
Awesome.
right.
Now, because we are already 12 minutes in and we have yet to even announce what we're talking about, I have one last thing.
How did we
Yes,
do that?
one last
Yes.
shout out.
And this time, Francis, I do not blame you for the long intro to get to the actual
Thank
topic
you.
because technically it's my fault.
No, that's okay.
But I just want to have just a big shout out to Truck Saunders. He is a high school classmate,
Yes.
and he just published his very first novel. He's been working on this in fits and starts for the last 10 years. And over the last couple of years, he has kind of not exactly documented because he hasn't really talked a whole lot about the story,
Yeah.
but he has, talked about when he's writing, what's going on, where he's struggling, what he hopes to do, when, and it's been a long, it's a long road.
I remember you called this out on Facebook, and I
Yes.
didn't have a context, so I'm glad you're
So-
giving that because
right,
I haven't
right.
bought it yet, but I will.
So the book is called Heavy Water, and it's only available on hardcover right now.
Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's either he's put together his own imprimatur for the publishing house, or he's working with another, a very small press up in his area, which is either one is possible. I don't know,
Right.
but the story sounds really good.
Genre.
It's sci-fi ish is
Okay.
if I remember correctly, because Again, until I had the book, I really had not a whole lot of details, but the story sounds really good to my ears.
Well, we always
I almost
we
brought
always support up and coming authors all the time.
the
So.
book, but I thought, well, what's the point? Because we're on a podcast, nobody can see it.
Yeah.
That's right.
And you guys have
Heavy-
already seen the picture on it.
Heavy
Heavy Water.
Heavy Water by Truck Saunders.
Truck Saunders, yes.
That's right. Available
So-
on Amazon and all.
At least Amazon. I don't know about anywhere else because that's the first place everybody goes.
That's right.
I doubt you'll see it in bookstores because it's small press at best.
Yeah, but
If
that's
it's
okay.
self-published, it's possible, but just go to Amazon. It's $25. So as a hardcover goes, that's actually a little
That's reasonable for hardcover.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's pretty reasonable.
Right.
So yeah, big shout out to my classmate. Always happy to support fellow authors.
Amen. Amen.
And I'd like to do a shout out too.
Sure.
Oh, certainly.
One of the things I do is, I have a small farm, although I'm not really growing anything yet, but I have a lot of neighbors and stuff that are small farmers. And the current estimates are that this year, 25% of small farmers are going to go out of business.
Damn.
So please support your small farmers.
Buy
especially-
local.
Buy local.
Go to the farmers markets.
Yes, please, or buy directly from the local farms. Go
Yes.
out of your way. because they're struggling real bad.
At Mount Carmel, we had a couple from the Kramer clan that farmed. He had leased his land and farmed, and they did it for I think maybe 3 or 4 years, but just couldn't make a running go of it. And
Yes.
they would come every Sunday and they'd sell the produce afterwards. Yes, I know. That's his fault.
Stuff's buzzing.
Oh,
Sorry, my watch is buzzing, so I wanted to make sure nothing
So,
was going
but
on.
anyways, we are. If that's all, we should probably turn it back over to Francis and let him.
Thank you for that. Actually, it's really kind of interesting you say that because two of the things that we've been shouting out here do figure into what we're going to talk about today or who we're going to talk about today, both Americana and art. But we're not talking about painting, we're talking about film art. We're talking about the greatest, and I am not using hyperbole on that because I can back up what it said, the greatest film director of all time. Okay,
At least American film director.
I'll leave it. I'll say I'll
Joe, you'll go global on it.
I will double down because Akira Kurosawa himself said that he was.
Well, I'll sign that then.
I thought you might. Yeah,
Kurosawa says it.
Kurosawa said it.
I got to argue.
Steven Spielberg said it. Martin Scorsese said it. John Milius said it. And I know you're a big fan of John Milius. Francis Ford Coppola has said it. John Ford, considered to be and in any stretch of imagination, he's the only director to win 4 Oscars for Best Director. The only one.
Wow.
Nobody else has done it.
Interesting.
So you can make that argument very strongly. This man is the greatest movie director of all time. And nobody has come close. And there's some great names out there, and there's some great folks. And, we love our art. But Ford is greater than just that, partially because of not only of his genius, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but also because of his timing. Because so much of what he did when he did it contributed to our understanding of America, right or wrong, because of his imagery of the Western in particular, our national identity in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Yes.
Is drawn visually from him. I mean,
that's a fair statement.
It is. It really is. And Steven Spielberg himself has said, and of course, there's the anecdote that he put onto a recent movie about how he met Ford as a young man, and who talked to him a little bit. Ford is notoriously curmudgeonly.
Yeah.
He never did interviews, almost never, and he never went to any of the Academy Awards or any other awards that he won, with the exception of his Lifetime Achievement at the very end of his life. The American Film Institute did a special award to him, the very first one.
You kind of have to go to that one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and he goes in a wheelchair. I mean, this is like a year before he passes away, and Richard Nixon brought him out.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he and Nixon were friends. Even though he was a lifelong Democrat, he was a Kennedy supporter. Ford was, but Nixon and he were friends, and Nixon brought him out. And during the war, Ford was a great military guy. Even though he served as a commander of his own unit, we'll get into a little bit of that. And he reached the level of rear admiral in the reserves by the end of the war. And Nixon he says, because I'm commander in chief, I'm going to do it. You are now a full admiral. He does this on national. Yeah, right. And this is like a year before he passes away. And you can
technically he can't do that.
Well,
only Congress can approve an admiral.
Well, he made it happen, and everybody it was honorary.
They call those a brevet promotion.
That's
in
right.
the field. Yes.
And it was something that Ford was visibly moved at, which did not happen because most people thought him to be an asshole.
Well, and
in many ways, but he was also very
curmudgeon. Almost always goes with that.
It is, and but there are those who loved him. There are those.
His brother said that was a deliberate thing.
Yep.
To cover up being a softie
that is
on the inside.
And Katharine Hepburn herself said, because she and he were very close. They only did one picture together in the 30s.
Which was what?
It was Mary Queen of Scotland.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, this was early. This was like 36.
But they were friends for a long time.
For a long time.
He listened to a lot of her
advice.
Advice.
It was rumored they had an affair. Neither of them ever confirmed that. But and if it was brief.
A few affairs.
It was. That's correct. He
was married for life.
He was married for life. You're exactly right. And ironically, his family life they didn't talk much about. Most of it because he's so large of a figure, even though he was not
Metaphorically, he was a very slender man.
Slender man.
Yeah.
He had terrible eyesight. He wore thick glasses. He had cataract surgery later in life, and the rumor has it, and there's still some question, he pulls the bandage off too early, damages the eye, and that's why he has to have a eye patch for the rest of his life, because he's not blind in that eye, but it messes with his vision. So when you see the pictures of him later in life with the eye patch, that's what happened. But for a long time, he did not. But so many movies that we take for granted.
When was his first movie? Let's set some context.
He moved to Hollywood 1914 and started in the silent picture films. So it was
most of which have disappeared.
Yeah,
That is
so
correct.
nobody's really for sure exactly the.
Some of that stuff is out there. The big ones,
So,
the two
yeah.
big ones that he did.
A lot of them.
Now it was highly nepotistic because his brother was a movie star out here who had
Yeah, his brother had already kind of started. His brother was several years older and
Right.
had already started.
and he'd gotten to the point where he was pretty popular, so he had his own production company. And John Ford was digging ditches. He said, I happily dug ditches because I was in the movies. He was doing stuff like that. His brother abused him in many ways because he would do stunts where he'd make John Ford sit in. They even blew up a desk one time with dynamite with Ford sitting behind it. Yes. He spent 3 days in the hospital because of that, and he never really forgave his brother for some of the stuff.
That's a hard one to forgive.
It's a hard one to forgive. That's right.
I'm assuming OSHA wasn't there.
No, this is 1917. 1916 actually is when that happened, and later on in the early 30s, when Ford became somebody, he would cast his brother in bit parts, kind of as a way to say, "I'm the big dog now, and you're not." But he had that ability to hold a grudge for sure. But his first movie, he talked the studio into letting him run a 20-minute short film. And Carl Laemmle, who was head of the studio at the time, gave him 2 rolls of film to work with. And he and Harry Carey Sr., who became lifelong friends. Carey was starring in the movie. Again, this
He was
is silent.
lifelong friends with Harry Carey's son as well.
That's
Harry
right. Yeah,
Jr.
Dobie. It's Junior. That's right.
Junior, yeah. So it was, they were all
They
very
were all
close.
very tight. And what they did was Ford and Carey basically figured out a way to hoodwink the studio into getting them to get a full-length picture. So what they did is they wrote a script for a full-length, filmed until the film ran out. Then they called back to the studio and said, oh, the camera fell in the water. All the film is ruined. We need to get some more film. And sure enough, they get the same amount again, and they finish the picture. All right, and the Shooting Straight is the name of the picture, and it is available. You can find it.
Ironic, because they were not.
That's right. You can find it silent, but you can find it online, and you can watch it. It's hour 15 minutes, something like that, which is for full length at the time.
Yeah.
Well, Carl Laemmle, head of the studio, was furious when he figured out what had happened, and he fired both of the guys on the spot. But he took the film and watched it and realized this is something great. And it was a huge, huge hit, and he hired both of them back at double the salary, and that's where he started. And Ford began directing because Laemmle saw that this guy understands. I mean, what he puts on film, you're just naturally drawn to it. He's just got that talent, and it really is talent.
He had a visual sense
Exactly.
that grabbed the watcher.
That's right, and he did silent films for a long time. The biggest film he did, and it cost $450,000, which was an enormous sum of money in 1927, was called The Iron Horse.
Yes,
And that's the kind of the one that put him on the map because it was a big
that was
budget.
about the Promontory Point and all that
That's
stuff.
right. And it was a train, and he brought in extras, and he really did a lot of stuff that nobody was thinking to do, and he did it on budget. Which
See, now that's the impressive part.
that's right. And
But the reason I asked what his first film was,
yeah,
because if I don't stop you, you're going to keep going, and we'll never get anything beyond what you're saying. And I love you. I love your brother. I really do.
I understand.
So it ties back to one of your earlier statements, which is why I wanted to get context. So yes, he defined our understanding of our country because he dealt with mainly in stuff in the past.
Right.
So he helped define how we understood where we came from.
Right.
And the part of the reason for that, though, is that because he's there at the beginning, there's just not a lot of competition yet. So somebody of his skill,
That's right.
not only bubbles to the top, but stands out head and shoulders above
Oh
all
yeah.
the rest
Yeah.
because there's just nobody else like him yet. And so he's able to do that. And I think that's an important thing to remember. Not to say he would have been drowned out if there were as many filmmakers as there are today, but it's certainly possible.
Well, one of the things that figures into that too is the silent film era and the talkies are an enormous leap, and Ford figured it out right away. He adapted completely, and he zips right into with the sound, where a lot of the silent film directors just fell away. They couldn't operate. They didn't look. It didn't work right, and
Well-
Ford transitioned to it perfectly.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things I wanted to point out. There's a couple of things that are, I think, stand out for him. And I because again, I'm not as familiar with his filmography as you guys are. I know I've seen a bunch of his films, but I just don't track directors like
He
you
did
guys do.
142
So
in his career. There's a lot.
he's noted for action scenes. Right?
Yes.
And one of the things that you just don't see until much later in filmmaking is that kind of action, because people did filmmaking as if they were watching a play, and especially the silence were like that.
Right.
Yes. That kind of the on stage,
Yes.
limited perspective.
Limited perspective, narrow camera angles, and of course, with a silent film, everything was so exaggerated, almost like the way opera singers and actors do,
Yep.
because they have to be very exaggerated in everything they do and their gestures and what have you, because often your audience doesn't understand a word you're singing, so they have to be very express. But because he understood
Mm-hmm.
the realities of action in this tiny square before everybody else, he's groundbreaking, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he's also dealing with material at a time when we wanted to understand our history as black and white.
Oh yeah, he definitely
And-
does that. Yeah.
And that is certainly a theme that is recurrent, not just with his films, but everything through the 30s, 40s, 50s, and into the 60s. But that's pretty much where it ends.
And that's right. And he was part of the ending of that too, because not to jump ahead, but he realized, wait a minute, we didn't quite do justice to some of this. So by the time he's doing his last films in the 60s, he's trying to revision that and get more realistic. But he also recognizes that that's what people wanted. Americans, for whatever reason, needed to see what he gave them.
Well, yeah, in the 30s, you needed to feel good about things because everything was shit.
Well,
It
absolutely.
was the Depression.
And everything he did was not westerns. I want to make
Right.
sure that we make
Yeah.
that clear. He's
Right.
most famous for his westerns, and he did a ton of them. But he did many other things too.
Right. So, but you wanted feel good stuff, either stuff that made you feel good about who you were or about the country, or that things could get better, or that the bad guys, whether they be gangsters or corporate oligarchs, got their their comeuppance.
Mhm.
And then in the 40s, everything was patriotic.
Yeah.
Had to be patriotic. And the 50s, it's an interesting mix, because you have your that's where westerns really took off. Was in the
Right. Yeah, they
50s,
were in their full
up until the
ascendancy.
end of the 50s. And there's a lot of screwball comedy stuff still going on, but it's all stuff that is very lighthearted.
The Quiet Man's a good example of that.
Yeah.
So it's one of his best director
And
awards.
it's all stuff, not just him, but it's a time when you're almost limited in how you can present your stories.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
stories
because
that we might run today that pick the scab, so to speak. You could never have done then.
no studio would have ever greenlit.
Yeah.
Nobody would have. They would have laughed you out, because and it goes back to that life imitating art, or art imitating life. I mean, I'm kind of putting them both out here, but the reason that we got what we got is because that's what we wanted,
Right.
and because we got what we got, that's more of what we wanted. But eventually, trends run low, and by the mid '60s, Vietnam really changed all that. And we've
Right.
talked
Once
a lot
the epics end,
which is right at 65, the year I
Yeah.
was born. That's when Vietnam started.
Yes.
So it's when it all changed.
Francis killed the
Francis
epics.
killed the epics.
That's
yeah.
right. Why did I not know you guys were going to say that? All right.
It's logical.
Yeah, flawlessly, one might say. That's right. But I do want to talk just a little bit about his war. Before we go to the break, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that of his patriotism. We'll talk a little bit more about his movies on the other side, because there's several we must mention.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about the fact of his patriotism, which was huge. And John Wayne kind of simpatico on that. You would call them best friends, but really
They had a falling out later, didn't they?
not really. It's Henry Fonda that had the huge falling out with it. Yeah.
I was just when I had read somewhere
Well,
recently about a falling out.
there was a
back and forth and
they were a little bit of that because Ford was an asshole, as I've said, on screen, and he would even tell Duke Wayne, of all people, and this is in the 50s when John Wayne is a big star, you know, Dad, can't you act, Duke? Come on.
Well, if anybody can do it,
Well, that's right. Ford was notorious for that sort of thing. He would manipulate his actors and actresses, but it's mostly men because that's what he's making. He said it's a very hyper-masculine content is what he's putting out.
well, and female roles back then were
They're just not people. Didn't want them. There was,
They were arm candy.
well, what roles they had, they were either arm candy, they were the dutiful wife, they were the
that's right. It's
damsel in distress.
damsel in distress.
very much so. So, although there were many of his female actors,
There were a
actresses
few,
that adored
Yes.
him.
Anything Katharine Hepburn would have been a strong female lead.
Correct,
but
yeah.
she's
Maureen O'Hara too.
Yeah,
and
oh,
she
yes.
was one of his stock companies.
Oh.
She did a lot of stuff with him in many ways, and Vera Miles did some stuff. She was in The Searchers and stuff like that. So they really all adored him because his craft put aside. Woody Strode, character actor, black man, who became a bit of a character actor star in the 50s and 60s, was treated horrifically by him, and yet Woody Strode came, spent the night at his house on the floor by his bed the night he died and was holding his hand at the moment he passed, because he gave him a career. And he says, Woody, I cannot make you a star. I cannot make a black man a star. It can't happen. But I can make you a damn well-paid character actor. And he did.
Yeah.
And he never forgot that, even though there were times on set that he was just mercilessly terrible.
but he
to
was
them.
merciless to everybody.
But he was to everybody. That's correct, and that's just who he was. And he was notorious. Of Mice and Men is one of his big pre during the Depression, ironically, pre-war films with Henry Fonda, and
Interwar, technically.
yeah, and he refused the big scene at the end where the main character Jode and his mother are parting forever. He refused to let the Fonda and the other actress who was with him, I can't remember her name. He refused to let them rehearse. He said, "I want," and it was deliberate. He says, "Nope, you're not. You're going to get up there and you're going to do it." And Fonda hated him for that. But he said in the end, it got the performance out of him that everybody on set was just bawling.
Right.
He says,
Was it also the last scene they filmed?
Yes, it was.
Because that has to be.
That's
to
exactly,
get the emotional reaction.
He deliberately
wants.
did
Yes.
that too, because
Yes.
they don't always film in the right order. But that's
Right. Well, yeah, you do all your exteriors, you do all your interiors.
Ford was very deliberate, very manipulative, and that's just one example. But we'll talk a little bit about. But one of the things that by the time in the 40s come, he has spent 3 or 4 years putting together a film cadre that he tries to sell to the War Department, saying, I got guys who are experts in their field that can go out and help you document this war. The Navy passed, but Wild Bill Donovan from the OSS
Yep.
saw the value of this, and he basically hires Ford and all his people. They make 2, possibly 3, but 2 documentaries of the war. One is about Pearl Harbor, but that one kind of got a little bit of a snub because it kind of accused the U.S. of not being ready. So the War Department, maybe we're better
Which
watch.
he was right.
He was, that's why. But he says, well, do we really want to let him have this full leash? But they ended up they sent him to Midway because they knew the battle was coming there. He was at Midway during the battle.
Wow.
He was on top of the biggest building there, the radio tower, I think, when the planes came in, and he filmed all of this. He says you can see he's looking for the pilots' faces, the Japanese pilots' faces as they come through. They hit the tower, knock him unconscious. He hits shrapnel in his body. He wakes back up, finishes filming, smuggles the film out of Midway after the battle's over because he's afraid he's going to be censored, and puts together a masterpiece. And at his and he it takes him a while to recover because he's seriously wounded. He ends up at his funeral. The flag from Midway, from the battle, is draped over his casket.
Ooh.
So it's just, I just want to kind of point out that he is much more than he actually did a VD film for the War Department, of all things. That you can find that, and he did it from the perspective like you're in a classroom, and it's actually very good. to tell some pretty awful stuff. But and
Aren't you so glad those are things we were never subjected to?
thank you,
Because I think
God.
we just missed that.
No,
you
we
know?
had blood on the highway.
Well,
Yeah, that's true. They're one, but hey, it wasn't directed by John Ford. That's for sure. So
probably would have been much better if it
probably
had
would have
been.
been much better. Speaking of which, though, let's put that pause in there and let's go.
Bourbon break.
Oh yes, absolutely. Martin has, for some reason, demanded that I have a particular bourbon this time.
So you are our resident rye whiskey guy.
I am. I do love a good rye. Yes.
Okay, so I acquired that Russell's rye a year ago at an auction to benefit Spalding University at their Day of the Downs.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's right. You won a big batch of stuff, didn't
Yeah, I won 5 or 6 bottles. That one has never been opened, but
Until now.
and then so I wanted Francis to have some of that because he is our rye.
Well, yeah, I
Aficionado.
do like rye. I mean, it's going to be hard to beat the Hemingway. I've said that
Yeah.
several times. I really
This,
enjoy
I
it.
mean, it's an Eddie Russell.
It is. You don't get any. It's 104 proof. I did check it before, and you've given us these wonderful spherical ices here that it's bloomed just enough because we're 30 minutes in or so. Ooh, that's good. It is.
Then it's yours.
What?
It's yours.
You can give me the bottle?
Yes, please take the bottle.
Man, I'll have to. Your stock price went up a little bit there, Martin.
He takes back all that stuff he said to me the other day.
Exactly.
We need to film at Studio M more often.
That's right. This is a fantastic.
Well, like I said, I've had it for a year. It's never been opened, and you're our
no, and-
you're our
and
rye
you
guy.
guys
So add
most-
that to your rye collection.
Most of you guys are not rye guys, and we've talked about that.
It depends. I am coming around to the rye as long as it's by itself. But because again, until you try it, you just don't know how much it's going to hang around and affect your palate.
agree, and
And
it's-
that's the problem.
the beauty of this one here. It is very similar to the way the Hemingway works. It is not overpowering. It's been properly
It's that
blended.
Hemingway, that taste that we had,
was good.
not this past one, the one before,
Yeah.
was phenomenal. I was
Ab-
so surprised at it.
Absolutely, and maybe we just when we first started, we just didn't have the right ryes.
Well, we had a lot. I think the problem was we had high rye bourbons.
Yeah,
And when we have anything high rye and you're doing other stuff that is either low rye or no rye, after them, it's just so hard to.
yeah. You got to. How do you cleanse the palate?
Can't
Exactly, you have to cleanse the palate.
recalibrate. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
some of those, the peppery taste just hangs around a long.
Well, this one does not. It stays in the mouth. It doesn't have much of a hug, which you'd think it would. It's got a little pepper taste to it, but
it's all a kiss.
yeah, it's all in a kiss. In fact, it isn't. It's in the lips. I can still taste it
Okay.
right
Did
Well, that
there.
makes
that one
sense,
have
yeah.
an age statement on it?
I did not see it. No. It's a single barrel, is what we.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
This one's a single
It
barrel.
is kind of a high end one then.
It is absolutely, yeah. And
Single barrel rye.
yeah, and it's 104 proof, so it's probably gonna vary greatly depending on
Yeah.
what batch you got.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But this is it is very smooth. I mean, it is.
So,
very
what kind
smooth.
of any notes you can take out of that you're? tasting?
Guys, I'm not really good at that, like you all are. Definitely the pepper. It's got a little. It's like a little butter in it.
Oh,
Oh, good.
I mean,
Very nice.
which seems odd, but that's what I'm picking up
well,
on.
see,
that.
Yeah,
now,
a little-
that sounds very tantalizing.
Yeah,
A
it's-
little salted butter.
A
or
little
something.
salted butter. Is that very good? Yes, because it's got that smooth. And again, if I had taken it neat, I might have a different experience.
Right.
But this blooms just perfect. I would encourage you guys. Don't be afraid of it because I'm really, really.
I have seen that on the shelves. I've never picked it up because that was a
in Eddie Russell we trust. I mean,
Oh,
come on,
absolutely.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
There's,
yeah.
there's not a single thing that they
Russell's Reserve, that 10-year bottle. That is
Absolutely.
a phenomenal bottle.
Everything
And it's
that-
a relatively inexpensive for a
everything
10-year
that
bottle.
we've ever bought from them. It's
Yes.
great stuff. They're certainly one of our favorite brands.
Good.
Uh,
Well, it
but,
does
uh,
my heart.
Well,
good,
I
that
might
you'll be enjoying that.
I might even break into tears, but I'll do my best not to, because thank you for that. That is a great gift, a great indeed gift, and I will be definitely drinking more. I've been drinking more rye, and I will continue to drink more rye. I still have the Basil Hayden dark rye yet to crack.
Yeah.
That's on the list up there, and I've still got, and I'm waiting for you guys to get back around. We'll do the Basil Hayden 10-year.
Yes, I'm
Yes.
dying to try the Basil Hayden 10 years.
Yes.
we didn't crack that one yet. but
I've been
it's waiting.
thinking about the Basil Hayden because I can't remember if it was on the trip over, or if it was last night, because I almost poured a bourbon last night. I thought, no, I'm going to have bourbon tomorrow early in the morning, and let's have some break there in my palate. But because as Brother Andre rightly noted early on, I think before we started the show, I do like that high proof.
Yes, you
bourbon.
do, and it gives me headaches. I wish. I
Well,
could
the
do
thing
that.
I like
It's called a
about it,
hangover.
yes.
on the front end, yeah, okay.
Well, I like to me, it just seems like the combination of not like I don't want a 120 proof that's only been aged 4 years. Okay.
Mhm.
That's fair. Yeah,
'Cause
That's very close to being called moonshine.
very much. Yeah. Well, except moonshine doesn't really get aged.
yeah.
But I like the combination of, at least 6 years
Mm-hmm.
and the high, high proof.
Old Forster Prohibition style.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Although
I
honestly, I like the 1910 better.
I do too.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
The
That 1910
1910 is supposed to be the kind of the crown one.
Yeah.
I would
all that.
agree.
I would have thought
I
that
like the
1920,
1920 also,
but I like
yeah,
the 1910 a little better.
yeah, the 1910
I would
is,
agree.
is supposed
So-
to be the killer.
So, and thinking about that and thinking about how, well, historically we've always really liked the Basil Hayden, partially because that was the first bourbon that the three of us really got into.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And,
Which was expensive at the time.
well, yeah, it was $35 at the time, and it still is around $35, maybe 40 depending on for the base one. The
Mhm.
The everyday. Yeah.
yeah, the new ones tend to go a little closer to 50. But the lower proof bourbons, sometimes they taste a little thin to me now.
Yeah.
Now the basil, I've gotten to the point where I think I would prefer that to be almost no water in that, because it's got good flavor already,
Mhm.
and again, being only 80 proof, there's a fine line between bourbon
Mhm.
and bourbon flavored water. Once you start getting the ice to melt at that lower proof,
Yeah. Eventually, you reach
Um,
that point,
and-
if you let it go too long.
the new flavors expressions that they have done a phenomenal job of maintaining flavor at that lower
At
proof.
that full level.
At
yeah.
after things start blooming and the water really starts mixing. So I just wanted to shout out to them. I think that they do a fantastic job, and I've
It's-
loved
they're
every
still-
single one.
Still one of my very favorite brands.
Yes.
And I'm delighted.
Even though this was an Eddie Russell talk, but you just talked about I just had to bring that out because it's just
well,
been-
I totally give you that, because a good bourbon is a good bourbon is a good bourbon, guys.
yes.
Martin, what are you drinking?
So I poured for me.
Even though I see the bottle and know what it is.
Yeah, for me and for
Robert.
Robert, and even for you too as well, Brother Andre. Right?
Martin started drinking much earlier.
Apparently.
No, well, I was just pausing to make sure that I'm remembering all of this what I poured, because Brother Andre brought his own.
Yes, he misinterpreted a comment in our secure
Yeah,
chat.
So I told him he absolutely could not drink what he brought, and he had to drink something from my shelf here. But we opened my new bottle of Jep the Creed Weeded,
Okay.
which is not one we've had on the
No,
show.
this is brand new. Just came out this past summer, I
Right.
guess.
Right.
I didn't
summer-
know that was weeded, but that makes sense now.
Yes,
Yes.
it is a 6-year-old weeded bourbon.
I think most of their stuff is in that 6-year range.
Right.
So 93 proof, so not a high proofer.
No, but it's above the base, so that's
But as we know from Jep the Creed, primarily they use their own corn
yeah.
that is-
Locally sourced.
that's right.
grown on property.
Yeah, which that fits in with the Imperator's imperative there about going local.
That's right.
They exemplify
Dirt to
that.
bottle,
That's right.
everything.
They-
They local source.
We've met with the master distiller on multiple occasions, and she's just an amazing lady.
She is.
They
She's a great woman.
They have a beautiful facility right off of I-64.
Yep, you can see it right as you
Yes.
drive past. That's right.
About halfway between Louisville and Lexington.
It's called Shelbyville.
Yeah.
Yep,
close.
right there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I have liked everything that I've ever done with them. Don't think I've had. Did they have this one at the Bourbon Fest?
They did. That's where we first tried it.
Okay.
At least I did.
Because they had
I
three
did not
different.
try it there.
Okay.
They had 3 varieties, and I cannot remember the red, white, and blue is the one that I've had.
Yeah.
Yes.
That I really
and I
really
think
liked.
they had the Bloody Butcher,
That's the other one. That's
Yes.
correct. Yes.
and then they've got their high rye bourbon.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. Because this
yeah.
one here, I don't know that I had it. I may have.
Oh wait, I think they also had the 4-grain.
Yeah, I think so. I think the 4-grain
Yes.
was there. So, but yeah, this is weeded, so no rye,
Mhm.
but
It's interesting.
buttercream kind of vanilla cream sort of
Mhm.
flavor to it.
Unbloomed, when my tasting notes that I took, when the first taste I had of it, it reminded me of corn syrup. Very sweet, which I
Mhm.
didn't know it was a weeded bourbon, but once you mentioned
Yes,
that,
so they're
Mhm.
going to run much sweeter than the ryes.
Yeah,
See, now this is interesting
definitely.
because for me, and as soon as I tasted, it's like, oh yes, that is exactly what I had. So the taste stuck with me.
Mhm.
And for a weeded bourbon, I am not getting that. To me, I'm getting flavors that make me think that this is a Scotch because it almost tastes peaty to me.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
There's probably a reason for that. Well, the family motto's from Scotland. They're Scottish.
Right, right.
And this is a
Gosh.
malted wheat.
Yes, it is a malted wheat. Yes.
So you're getting a little bit of a different.
But still, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not getting a whole lot of the sweetness that I would expect from a weeded bourbon that I get from others.
I get it on the end, like it's not there initially, but it's like the second flavor that I get is that tiny bit of like a maple sweetness.
Yeah.
after it bloomed, I had baking notes of cardamom and cloves.
Wow, you are
Uh-huh.
you are a phenom.
Now, did you have to
sir.
look that up, or did you know that?
Oh, I knew that.
Oh, okay. Just because
He's
that's
a
impressive.
cooker.
That's good.
That's
You're
impressive.
getting
Telling you
good.
But also, I want to testify to something that was said earlier.
Testify, brother. Testify.
I'm raising my right hand as I say this. But 12 days ago I had to quit soft drinks because I had some stomach
Mhm.
surgery, and it's amazing how your palate blooms and you're able
Mhm.
to pick up some more notes when you're not drinking soft drinks.
Amen. I mean,
That
it's,
corn syrup in the soft drinks ruined your palate.
Yeah.
and that's
you-
why I
you
have such a
can't-
difficulty. I can't.
You
I
can't
quite
distinguish
break them.
anything. You just all you crave is just that hyper sweetness.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And this is just—it's a very good mellow sweet.
It is.
Yeah,
It-
maybe
I mean,
maybe I can see a little bit of that on the tongue after a while because I get that peatiness, or almost that grassy, um,
hmm
Well, there.
kind of in the back of the mouth. But on the tongue, maybe I can get a little bit of that. But to me, that flavor is just so overpowering
The-
that it's hard for me to pull anything else
Well,
out.
the earthiness runs across their entire line. They're using that.
It's
blood corn,
stronger here than in
Yeah.
any of the others to me.
but it's
Because the red, white, and blue is phenomenal.
Yeah. Oh,
they're-
yeah.
they all,
Phenomenal.
all their stuff smells great.
Let me see the bottle.
And but I mean it's definitely you can there's a different thing between the malted wheat and the straight wheat, and this is very good. It's it's got the vanilla caramely kind of smoothness that you get from those. Is what I get coming out of it. A lot of smoothness.
So you guys all drink the same thing then?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, this is
Well,
cool.
You're the oddball
mean,
out.
I sniffed
I-
it.
I would not
I'll happily
necessarily go to this as my first one, but I enjoy it absolutely.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's
Well,
It's a different
it's not
flavor.
it's not as like layered as some. But I mean, I think that's probably typical of a weeded anyway. That they're
Mhm.
not going to have all those layers.
Well, I don't know.
but
That
it's-
kind of depends because some of the Wellers I think
Yeah.
are fairly.
Yeah.
pretty weedy.
Yeah, I mean they're weeded bourbons, yeah, and I think there's some great
They
layers of flavor there.
Now Jephthah is one of the few that does do farm to bottle.
Yes,
They're doing it all.
Yeah, they do.
they do.
And
What they cannot grow, they
Mhm.
buy local.
they buy local, and
Yes.
they do. They have a lot more control over their sources than most.
Yes,
And they're very proud of that.
and it
Yeah, it's right.
shows.
Yeah. I think there's a quality that they
there is.
have that, and some of that is size too. They're not going to be, and they don't
Mhm.
want to be, the size of a Sazerac,
Yeah.
or some of these multinational corporations.
Let's hope they don't get
well, I
bought
think if
out.
they were selling that many bottles, that wouldn't bother you
Yeah,
that
it wouldn't
much.
hurt.
As long as they're in charge, that's kind
yes.
of to me
Right.
where I want to go with that
Yeah, I
because
don't-
I think
I
that
don't
they
think
lose
wanna give it
something.
up.
We need to get that interview Up on the
Yes, that's my goal for this coming time off.
Mhm.
This I should have it up for the
yes, because we did it.
Black
Robert
Friday.
Robert should be like he's our Joe Rogan. He's the interviewer.
Well,
he
hey,
did an
bring it on.
outstanding job
did.
interviewing Joyce. What is the last name of the family again?
Way to put him on the spot.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Sorry.
don't
It's
remember.
all right, yeah.
Anyway,
But Jess Joyce is the
the
master
owner
distiller.
and
Yes.
master distiller, and it's family owned. She works with her daughters.
Mhm.
Yeah, they made a
and-
great
and-
cocktail there. That
Yes, we
all
cannot
enjoy.
say enough about that cocktail.
Absolutely.
Everybody loves that.
So
Yeah, and they've done it every year that they've been there, and I've got a picture of it. I do need. I know.
You need to send that to us.
I didn't realize I hadn't done that.
I don't think so.
you have to post it in the secure communications channel.
I will do
please.
that because you, Martin, you have been pushing for me to post it on our blog, and I just haven't done it. But I do have.
Well,
it.
I don't know. Is that something that they? I mean,
Well,
yeah,
they it was public. It was right.
yeah,
there.
but I don't think they publish it on their website. So
It's a very good question.
Yeah, I
Mr.
think they
Garibaldi.
do. I think they have a
I
list
think
of
they do.
cocktails on their website.
yeah, but do they?
They didn't feature.
Because I
the
thought that was a
snakes and
recipe
otters?
they tried to keep fairly. Because I think on the original one that they had the first year we went, they just had a list of ingredients. They didn't have a mixture. You know, like it's, 3 ounces of this versus it wasn't. So I don't know if if that's on this year's.
Well,
Well, anyway,
They
send
know
it to
he's
us.
got a
I will keep it on
podcast
the
that still
secure
gave it
channel
to
for now.
him.
Secure channel for
because
now.
I really want to make some of it, and I think we're going to host Thanksgiving this year as we record. It's just a week out,
Mhm.
and I think I will try to go ahead and maybe make some of that up for everybody.
That's an excellent idea.
All right.
Yeah, it's not hard. All right,
So
let's-
Jeff the Creed weeded is a plus. Russell Rye is a plus.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Back to you,
let's
Francis.
all right, let's take us back to John Ford here. We've talked a lot. Like I say, I've kind of taken us up to where he has been in during the war, and he certainly served. He reached the level of rear admiral, but after that, he kind of went into a depression. After the war was over, he saw a lot of stuff. My God, he's wounded in battle, and his military love for all things military gradually went away. And if you can see this in some of his movies, one of my favorites, and if Cajun were here, he'd probably agree with he did his quote unquote cavalry trilogy,
Mhm.
Yeah.
3 movies. This was post-war.
She wore a yellow ribbon,
That's the
Right.
second one.
right?
The first one, no, actually, that's the third one. The first one was Fort Apache, which is by and away my favorite John Wayne movie of all time. Period.
Okay.
Fort Apache with Henry Fonda and Shirley Temple of all things. He had done a movie with her,
Yes.
and anybody that did movies with Ford, they love to come back. They were part of that stock company.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, he got tremendous performances, and yes, he did work with a lot of the same people over and over and over.
It's a Ward Bond is
Well, that's
another one.
that's partially
Bond, love
coming out
Ward
of the
Bond.
studio system, though.
A little bit of that, but
Yeah.
they once you reach certain levels, like John Wayne, because he wanted to work with him, they became
Yeah, yeah.
personal friends. Ward Bond, actually, the reason, and I'll drop back a little bit, the reason Wayne has a career and the reason Ward Bond had a career, even though it was a character actor, the two of them were USC football players, and in the late 20s, Ford was making a silent film. Where he needed some extras, and he goes that were beefy because that's what the thing was about. And he goes to USC and recruits all these football players. And these two guys actually were very interested, Marion Morrison
Yeah.
and Ward Bond, about the process, and they just became friends. They were all very, very important, and you'll see Ward Bond in a lot of those Ford pictures, and you'll see him, of course, in John Wayne. Of course, that's
Yeah.
Ford is the one that told him,
So
Marion Morrison ain't going to sell, guys.
right,
All
right.
right. So what are the
So
what are the
Fort
3?
Apache,
Fort Apache, Rio Grande,
Rio Grande,
and she wore a yellow ribbon. Ironically, Wayne does not play the same character in any of those, although you could make a case that the character he plays, Captain Kirby York, in the first movie, Fort Apache, is Colonel Kirby York years later in Rio Grande. It's a loose association, but Nathan Brittles is the character he plays later in She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, which is considered to be it's one of Wayne's finest performances because it's very much against type. He's an older character, much older than Wayne was, and it's got a lot of depth through it. A lot of that is Ford. A lot of that is Wayne, but it's considered to be one of those excellent, one of those perfect moments. It's not Ford's masterpiece. We'll talk about that in a second, but it's close.
Um,
And The Searchers is
Well, that's where I'm going to go. That's
yeah,
that's
is
his
the
masterpiece.
next- yeah.
yeah, I have some. Let's do The Searchers because I do want to bring something, but I think has because I think if Cajun were here, he would bring this up. So
Right.
Do
go
it.
ahead and talk. No,
Do it.
talk about The Searchers first.
Well, absolutely. Now, one of the things we have to understand is Ford hated the studios. He absolutely hated them, and anytime he could, he was famous for filming on location.
Yes.
And he's the one that discovered Monument Valley,
Yeah.
which has been filmed
Many of his opening shots are these
these
huge vistas.
huge vistas
These long
that
range
basically
shots.
is Navajo territory between Utah and Arizona.
Yeah.
And it's it's quite a few hours away. I mean, it would be an entourage when he would take people out there. I mean, the first time he ever filmed in Monument Valley, he took them all out on a circus train because that's all he could get to bring their crap out. And it was awful for many of them because they're camping rough. Now, the women would stay, in those days, there wasn't a hotel there. So the women stayed on the train, and the guys are camping out, roughing it in tents.
Right.
This is for weeks at a time, but every night they're having bonfires, they're having music. Ford would bring in an accordion player that would play all the time, even while he's shooting. He's playing the same guy.
Yes.
For 40
yes.
years.
He liked to have music on set during shooting.
And they would dub later, which everybody thought was a little bit redundant, but it got the actors to give the performance because the accordion player was just so good. I can't remember his name. They would 40 years the guy did it, and he would bring out those performances. But Monument Valley is this place where, I mean, it's been used a million times since then. For example, the one that always got me is remember when Forrest Gump finally stops running across the United States out in the middle of nowhere? That's Monument Valley. It's right there when they filmed that, when he said, okay.
Run, Forrest, run.
So it's like, I think I'm going to go home now. That was Monument Valley. So, but Ford used it many, many times. But the big one, though, that he used was his masterpiece, the one that Steven Spielberg considers the greatest movie ever filmed. Period. Amen. Genre irrespective.
Yeah.
Is The Searchers, 1955. And it's Ford's amazing use of Vista. He filmed it in VistaVision 70 millimeter, which was
Wow.
very expensive. But by this time, Ford is, he is the master, and everybody knows this.
And he draws a whale of a performance out of John Wayne.
That's right. From a character that is brutally flawed. I mean,
Yeah.
brutally flawed, which you just don't do that in 55. But he's a Confederate veteran who his niece is kidnapped by the Comanche. Now, as a general rule, a lot of Navajo. This is in Navajo territory. When Ford came, or any of the movies came, they employed Navajos all over the place. They really loved him because they brought a huge amount of dollars to their economy.
Right. This is a time when reservations had no income.
They're
Zero.
dirt poor, and
Yeah.
they Ford and they were all part of the deal. They were very welcoming. They made him honorary chief, all sorts of stuff like that. So, but it's still 55. You can't have a Native American in a starring role, in a speaking role. But even though they did extras, they did lots of things, so it wasn't quite there yet. So they had a white guy playing the villain of the story, Scar, who kidnaps the young girls early in the picture. And Ethan Edwards, who is the character that Wayne played, along with Captain Christopher Pike himself, Jeffrey Hunter, go on this search. That's hence the name, for this girl who has been taken by, for these two girls actually. It starts out.
Yes.
That's taken by these Comanches, and it runs over 5 years. And Ethan Edwards, the character, is a racist, harsh racist. He is a brutal, evil man. His intention, as you see it throughout the story as it unfolds, one of the older girls is killed along the way. He finds her body, and he comes back, and some of the most. This is 55, mind you, and he says, "Don't you ever ask me what I saw. Don't you ever ask me what I saw. Do you want me to draw you a damn picture? You don't need to know." For the girl, the older girl who was apparently raped and killed, and his hatred for the Native Americans is just unpalatable for 55. And it gets to the point where this goes on for years and years, searching for his niece with the intention of, and he's very clear that he's going to kill her when he finds her, because she has been corrupted by sleeping with and living with the Indians. He's that much of a racist, vile racist.
Right. The search isn't to rescue her.
It
search
starts
is-
out that way, but it
The
does
search
not.
is basically to, in his mind, put her out of her
Yeah,
misery. Yeah.
she has been thoroughly corrupted, and we cannot tolerate that.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey Hunter plays a very great foil to that, saying, "No, you can't do that. She's your niece. How dare you?" So that you've got this tension that goes through, and of course, eventually they do find her, and this is all done on this enormous canvas of Monument Valley.
Yeah.
And of course, when he finds her, he does not kill her.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm spoiling it's 1955 for God's sake.
It's okay. Don't
But
worry about
he
spoilers.
embraces her and takes her back home, and you get the iconic shot at the end. And this is probably one of the most famous shots in all of movie history that has been imitated a million times since then, is when he brings her back to not her family but their neighbors, because her family was killed. Ethan Edwards stays outside. Debbie the girl, Natalie Wood, by the way, young Natalie Wood plays the teenage version of her. They bring her into the house, and he stands outside, and Ford makes a shot through the doorway from the darkened house outside, and you see that he cannot come in. He will not come in. He cannot participate in this family life. He is the true outsider. And he walks away, and the door closes.
Doesn't feel himself worthy
correct.
of being a part of the family
all of
anymore.
the above, and
It's just full of
Word boner.
pathos.
absolutely. I was glad you said it. I was leading to that.
I was doing that for Martin.
Well, see, I was expecting
Thank you,
Martin to pick
Robert.
that up because that's.
Well, I know he wasn't doing it, so I had to pick it up for
Well, I'm
him.
glad
No,
you did because
yeah,
and it is
got it.
such an amazing moment. And again, it's his masterpiece. I encourage you folks, if you haven't seen The Searchers, or even if you have, to watch it again.
So, well, that's a loaded statement because you kind of touched on this, and I thought you'd never get to the point where we could talk about this. So,
I'm taking a breath. Go right ahead.
yeah, well, thank you. Yes, well, it needs to be a deep breath. I think you've sucked most of the oxygen out of the room. We love you. We do.
No, he's keeping us afloat
just
here.
Keep us-
passionate.
Yeah, he's keeping us afloat. Yes, I don't think, other than Bourbon Break, I don't think the Imperator has said almost anything this particular.
Well,
He did comment
in
on
there.
the sexual escapades.
That's true. Well, yes. What else would the Imperator comment on?
well, I didn't talk about John Ford's, sexual hygiene film.
Well, that's
That
true.
was the
Yes.
title of it.
I served it up for
He
you.
mentioned
on a
it,
silver
yes.
platter.
But I
I
was
was
Or his
expecting you to go there.
preferences.
Anyways,
Yes.
Back
anyways,
back to Robert. That's right.
you cannot talk about a director of this time, especially somebody who is so closely associated with westerns,
Mhm.
and how we talked about it at the beginning. He forms the American view of what our past means.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
You cannot talk about him without talking about portrayal of Native Americans, and you
Correct.
almost touched on it
A little bit.
a little bit there, with the with the studios not wanting to allow any natives to have real speaking roles. I mean, yes, natives had speaking roles, but nothing that would have
Not
been
really. I
a
mean,
major.
how?
I mean, the character of Scar in that movie
Right.
was a white guy who,
Right,
who
and that
spent
was
his
not
time
uncommon.
actually.
I mean,
Ford
yeah,
hated it. but
Jack Palance played a Native American in a film.
Well,
Right.
Ricardo Montalban played a Native American in Cheyenne Autumn, which was in just about 10 years later with Ford.
Right.
And, hey, we all love Ricardo
But I mean,
Montalban.
it's not
but-
just who got to play the parts, though. It was very much a one-sided view.
very
Oh,
much
yeah.
so. Yes,
And yes, that's that's the time. But again, as you pointed out, he formed a lot of the opinion on that because, probably for most people growing up in the 30s and the 40s, certainly the 20s, 30s, and 40s, they would have had no concept of what Western life would have been like because at best they would have read books about it because we didn't have that visual medium.
maybe their grandparents talked about it.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that would
Maybe.
it would be an oral tradition, but only one generation, two generations back. But
Right, but
that would have been the tipping point.
But even
of
so,
really
most of those
losing it, yeah.
grandparents wouldn't have been in the West.
No.
That's right. Yeah.
So it still wouldn't
and
have
West,
been.
the Western genre of what we anticipated is overblown. The Western genre, Western living was kind of boring.
Well, it was boring. It was brutal. It was cold. It was
not-
harsh.
yeah.
I mean,
And Ford single-handedly, mostly because he was so good at it. I'll give him that much credit. formed our understanding of that. Now, he's not alone in that.
No, he's not.
Because
But
the
it's-
studio system was all about B movies. I mean, Republic Pictures, they were the ones that did the Cavalry trilogy,
Yeah.
which was a plum for them to get John Ford to work with them, because they're doing B westerns. That's what they do. They don't getting an Oscar winner.
Honestly, my favorite studio was Republic.
yeah, and they,
I mean, not just for the B what I mean, because they did lots of comedies. They did lots of the.
they're always doing low budget stuff
Yeah.
because it doesn't take much, and they're cranking them out. And it was to get an A-lister like Ford was a huge,
And Wayne.
and Wayne
Okay.
was a plum in 48, 49,
But-
and 50.
I mean,
when
one
they're
of,
doing this.
one of the things that we've slightly touched upon here and there, racism was rank in America,
Absolutely.
and in the films, it's to the level of it's almost propagandized. The stereotypes are just over the top.
Well, that's the thing.
The-
They're all even the white characters are all
They
stereotypes.
are.
I mean,
They
it's
are. Everything is
everything abounds,
stereotyped.
yes, yeah.
Everything is done that way in movies of that time.
well, realistically though, it's for the most part, it's still like that as far
It
as
is.
stereotypes,
It is.
because stereotypes are a shorthand for conveying
It is.
so much,
Yes.
and
I'll-
that's why you have them in
Oh,
the
I know.
creative arts.
I'll give you one of those moments where that changed, and it's in 1960. It's with Woody Strode that I talked about earlier.
Yes.
It's the movie Sergeant Rutledge.
Mm-hmm.
Now Woody Strode was not the lead, because you can't have a black
Yes.
man as the lead, but he was essentially the main character in this movie that deals with racism in your face.
Yes, it
and
does.
Ford deliberately wanted to make this movie.
Mhm.
Hey, he and Woody Strode were great collaborators, great friends, and it puts this is subversive to the point. Ford has
is.
realized by this point, holy crap, what have I done?
Yeah.
To go back to what you're talking
Exactly.
about here, what I created something that I didn't mean
Mhm.
to. I just kind of went along with it, but because of his levels and
Mhm.
the racism that he brought in, he regretted it terribly.
He did.
And that's why Sergeant Rutledge in particular was a huge change, but it wasn't well received.
well, and that's part
It's
of
a reflection of where we were.
yeah. Well, and and part of bringing this up is again, it's not to denigrate him or his legacy, because as a filmmaker, the quality of the films is paramount. It's just it's unparalleled.
Yeah.
However, the message that those films conveyed, whether it was intentional or not,
Yes.
Yeah, he didn't realize at the time.
No.
it is,
he did.
and certainly there's going to be some overtness in that, because either him or the studios. All right, well, we got to have good guys and bad guys, because
Yes.
you can't have a western without good guys and bad guys.
Yeah.
You can't have a gangster movie without good guys and bad
Mhm.
guys, right? And so when we grew up, we played cowboys and Indians, right?
Yeah.
Every one of us here.
I'm sure.
Never, ever
Mhm.
were the Indians the good guys.
No.
That's right.
Ever.
And that's
Well,
just
and-
we were raised and we
And that's because that's the image we were given. And yet, as we know, and as we have discussed on the show, Cajun did a great job bringing this out in our
Manifest Destiny
Manifest
series.
Destiny series. The army, the cavalry, the cowboys were quite often the bad guys,
They
not
were.
the good guys.
Very much so, and
Well-
that was put forth in both in Sergeant Rutledge, and I just want to touch on this just for a second, Imperator, before I send it back to you. The movie with Ricardo Montalban, Cheyenne Autumn from '64,
Yes.
was absolutely about the villainy of the United States white man, essentially, in what they did to the Native Americans, and it was one of Ford's swan songs. He only did a few movies after that. It didn't get a lot of traction, even though, for God's sakes, it's Ricardo Montalban.
Yes, but Ricardo Montalban in 1964 is not Ricardo Montalban of the late 70s, early 80s.
But he
I was thinking Mr. Rourke, but all right.
Oh yeah, okay, but yeah. Nevertheless, it was. We know his quality as an actor,
Yes,
And-
Ricardo Montalban is one of the
and he
great
is
actors.
capable of doing some great stuff. Cheyenne Autumn, which I have not seen, but it's now at the top of my list because it's one of those apologies of, holy shit, what have we done?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so back to you, Imperator.
But I mean, as far as like the Cowboys and Indians stuff, it was to the point of perfect example. I was going through a lot of the old Warner Brothers cartoons and what
Oh,
have you.
yes, yes.
And there's one where it's Bugs Bunny and he's shooting at Indians.
One little Indian, two little Indian, three
Indians,
little
three
Indian, ding.
And
Yep.
then he pauses because he's marked down the Indians that he shot and killed.
Yeah.
On the thing. He pauses. He goes back and he takes one of the ones and erases half of it. and goes, "Oh, that was a half breed."
Yes.
Oh God.
It's-
And
yeah,
you
this
see,
this is I think
this is what we grew up with
yeah, because they were
because of this, and Ford propagated that. So did all the
Yeah.
studios and the system.
On the one hand, you can say, well, this is what everything was at the time, but on the other hand, as you pointed out, he's also the shaper.
that's right,
And so I think he,
I don't
again,
think he-
unintentionally or not,
yes,
yeah,
it has to be called out.
That's correct.
It has to be
You're
recognized,
exactly
not just
right.
because I want to, because I don't want to badmouth them, but
yeah, he
Well,
did catch
things-
on to it, but
he
so many
recognized- There's a
others didn't.
no, there
Right.
were
And
lots
I
of
think
it.
that's kind of what you're going back is,
yes,
yeah,
you know, maybe he caught it and understood it and repented, but most of them didn't. Most
Exactly.
of them embraced it
Yeah.
and went on with it, and that is a national shame
you know,
it is.
for us.
Wayne would defend in many films, would be a defender of the natives.
Yes, he
would.
was.
Yes,
Wayne was very
he
much that,
was.
and, because he also recognized, and some of this is Ford's influence. For example, that movie Fort Apache, it's definitely my favorite of that. It is a very sympathetic portrayal of the Native Americans. Cochise, Geronimo, and the others are the victims of
Yeah.
Henry Fonda, who is the martinet, who forces a conflict between them and ends up being slaughtered because of it, and then becomes legendized. Which that to me, that's what Ford, even if this is 48, mind you, showing folks our understanding of what we put forth and raise up is flawed.
Even so, it's been a while since I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, part of it was he recognized this specifically after his wartime.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
exactly
Because
right. He would have never done that
he-
before there.
And if he hadn't done that, I don't know that he ever would have recognized, because that was.
It's
late
hard
in
to
his-
say,
it-
yes.
it was late in his life, and most people didn't, short of having some epiphany, and he
a lo-
had that.
and
During
he
the war.
did, because he would never talk about combat and military and all that
Most veterans do not.
as a
Yeah,
veteran
exactly.
because he's seen
Not
it.
details.
Not details.
Yeah.
And it was hard. His sons talk about, his children talk about the fact that he didn't really talk about that time much.
So,
And all the friends that he knew, even Wayne, they just didn't do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
and and again, I don't mean to harp on this. I just want to to point out the kind of things. It's been a while since I've seen Fort Apache. It's been years
Yeah.
since I've seen that. So I can't recall the specifics of how they were portrayed, but that is absolutely the exception because
It is.
But I would bet even within that,
Yeah.
there was still quite a bit of what you usually saw, because even when the Indians, the natives, were portrayed at least in a neutral light, they were still portrayed as ignorant savages,
drunkards.
drunkards, simple-minded,
Mhm.
easily tricked, and incredibly violent. That was the stereotype. And
Yeah.
if not, and I'm saying that was how they were portrayed in this,
that movie,
but I'm willing
it
to
was-
bet.
it was not. But he didn't stick with
Well,
it.
I'm willing to bet though that there were at least one or two of those that were those traits that were, because those were the default traits you had to draw from, because there was no other acceptable way to portray.
Ironically, Fort Apache was kind of that exception, because they talked about the whole drunken Indian stuff like that. The Indian affairs gentleman, Meacham in the movie, is shown as the villain who is portraying that.
Well, and that is very factual, because Indian Affairs was
Correct.
horrible
and,
with that stuff.
and it was very, very Fort Apache again. But Ford didn't stick with that, because this is 48, and he's doing in 55. He's doing the Searchers, which is complete opposite. Whereas
Right.
the Indians are absolutely
Yes, that is
the villain.
quintessential. I mean, it's a great film, but it is also probably one of the worst portrayals, in the sense that it is. And I'm not saying these things did not happen. See, that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of these things did happen, not necessarily that exact incident, but incidents very much like that did happen.
One of the reasons that
And
that's
the only thing we ever focused on.
You're right.
We never focused on the crap we did to them.
right.
Mhm.
And it's interesting that you say that too, because in the Searchers in particular, Ford goes to great lengths not only to deepen the character of complicated Ethan Edwards, but also Scar is shown as he's off screen for most of the picture, but when you finally do see him towards the end, mostly, he and Edwards discover they're exactly bloody the same, because
Right,
they both hate. And that's what, and they bounce back and forth with each other on several things. And you realize Scar is is Edwards on the other side of the coin.
Mhm.
They both hate the other side. That's what gives
They
them
are.
existence. Yeah,
Johnny Ringo.
that's right.
There's a deep hole inside of them that just cannot be filled with anything.
And interesting you say that. The Ringo Kid was Wayne's. And before we kind of wrap us up here, in '39 with Stagecoach, which was
Another great film.
which was
fantastic.
which was the believe it or not, westerns were waning bad.
No pun intended.
Yeah. Oh boy, I stepped in that like a wet cow pie. You're right. It was they were becoming passe until Stagecoach, and Ford brings in John Wayne, who originally didn't think he was going to the part. Ford had to practically knock him over the head and said, "No, I want you to do this." And it reinvigorated because it took that story and made it personal. And I know I want to talk about Mr. Roberts, and I want to hear from Martin here in a second, but I will say this, that in Stagecoach, there is a scene with Yakima Canutt, whom we all know as the great physical actor stuntman, where he as an Indian jumps on the moving stage onto their horses and ends up crawling underneath while it's running. He does the similar stunt in Ben-Hur during the chariot race, but
just stay in the chariot, Chuck. I guarantee you're going to win the damn race.
That's right. That's William Wyler. But it ends up. Steven Spielberg loved that scene because nobody had ever done it. Yakima Canutt thought it up, goes to John Ford and gets it happen, and he does the damn thing. And this is not.
That's an astounding thing because
these horses are
he's a dead man.
Absolutely, these horses are running. Ford is filming the actual living thing. This is not on a stage. This is not CGI.
And this is a one-take thing.
One take thing.
Do this
you
twice.
don't do it twice. And you might remember in Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indiana Jones jumps out of the moving truck and goes back underneath and is hanging by the whip.
Yeah.
Spielberg deliberately wanted Yakima Canutt to help him stage that as an homage to that scene that he did in Stagecoach. That's one of the things that you just didn't do that. And Canutt is
and it's stunts like that Indiana Jones went through that caused him to say it's not the years, it's the mileage.
That's right, and that was deliberate. That was a deliberate callback.
But it was a different point in movie production because that was a time when you used live rounds when you were shooting. They would actually hire sharpshooters. When you see these scenes where you've got somebody hiding behind a rock and the shots are hitting the rock in front of them.
Things chip off.
And things chip off. Those are real live rounds.
Yeah, you've got experts that know what they're doing.
They had guys that were great shots doing it. And, when they were...
You said you want to raise? Okay, Mr. Sharpshooter.
When you were using explosives, like you were talking about with Ford with the
that's
desk
right.
and stuff. No, people were really blowing crap up.
Well, yeah, because you didn't have the money to spend on anything except that.
But you also didn't have CGI.
Well, absolutely.
You didn't have.
You couldn't do miniatures.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't do the miniatures like they're doing now. But you were also You were shooting on film.
That's right. Yeah.
And the film was expensive.
Very much so. That's one of the reasons that
that's
Ford
why
did what he did. Yeah.
Exactly. When they had the thing.
That's why they fired his ass.
And so when people were doing stunts, they were actually doing stunts.
Yes, real stunts.
Well, yeah, and that's why Clint Eastwood was famous for one take.
Yes.
That's the way it was supposed to be. That's how he
Exactly.
was taught. You don't waste your time.
You don't waste the film.
You don't waste the film for these guys to take 16 takes just to make sure they found
Exactly.
themselves.
Right. Well, nowadays everything's digital. Film costs nothing because there is no film.
And that's why a lot of that is very different today. But
Well, and everything, especially if you're doing any kind of film that has any fantasy or science fiction element to it, it's always astounding when you see behind the scenes photos of somebody like in a Star Wars film. And they're in costume, sometimes only half a costume.
Yep.
Like in shots you see of the Avengers when they do the time travel scene.
right.
Yeah.
It's not the full costume; it's like the waist up. And it's all green screen around them.
Yeah.
So they're acting. I mean, they are doing the Brent Spiner thing before there was a Brent Spiner thing. I mean, he was doing it before then.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's even bigger scale now.
Very much so.
I can't imagine.
Well,
Yeah, that's alien. It would have been alien
Well,
to Ford.
the big expense nowadays is the stars. The
Yes.
people who
Well,
are
I don't know.
acting.
Some of that special.
Well, some of the special
Special-
effects
yeah.
will add up.
Yeah.
But the time for those individuals and what they're going through with getting into makeup, if they can avoid doing a full outfit,
Yeah,
they're avoiding doing a full outfit.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the studio system is kind of collapsed where
Yes.
that was kept under control more so. But
Well,
I need to get to Martin. I need to get to Martin.
So there's two important films that are a little bit later for Ford but are landmark. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's the one we need to talk
You
about.
got to do that one. That's a very important kind of flops a lot of
It
tropes on its head.
He filmed it in black and white in '61. He didn't have to.
Yeah.
He could have done color.
Yeah.
He deliberately chose to do black and white.
Yeah.
And it's attempt to be one of those. This is when after he's had his epiphany of what have I done.
Yes.
He does a complete revisionism, and it's more than just the Native Americans. Native Americans aren't even in this movie, but it's about what is this Western trope of the white-hatted hero.
Exactly.
And
Is
how
it
that's not right.
Especially because it's in black and white. Could you call this a Western noir?
Absolutely. In fact, he was doing film noir before there was such a thing. He was doing this stuff in one of his biggest movies in the 30s, and it was with Victor McLaughlin. It was The Informer. It's the one that really, and it was considered to be film noir. And this is early.
Yep.
He started that genre in many ways.
Well, the reason I ask is,
he just didn't stick with
noir and Western generally don't go together. But
You're right, and that was the intention of that. And he takes and
He
most of
filmed
us know that,
Sepia.
yeah. And he takes Jimmy Stewart as the hero, and turns out the fact, and it is the most and it ends with the most famous line, because if you know the story, you have this amazingly cruel, awful villain of Liberty Valance, played by Lee Marvin.
Yep.
I mean, my God,
Lee Marvin is a fantastic actor.
Oh my God, this guy here is just evil incarnate, and yet he confronts Rance Stoddard, who is Jimmy Stewart, the lawman, the lawyer, confronts him and supposedly kills him, and becomes a legend. He becomes a senator. He becomes a hero, and he goes on through all this, and you find out at the end, it was only his friend John Wayne. Tom Donathan, who actually shot from the alleyway,
Right.
Because Rance Stoddard can't hit the broadside of a barn. We've established that, and saves his life and puts it and ends up where Jimmy Stewart gets the girl, who Wayne, by saving his life, not only he lost the woman he was going to marry, he ends up burning down his own house that he was building, and it's just a complete repudiation of, and it says it at the very last line, and it's become a legend itself. He says, "When fact and legend come together, print the legend."
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what he was trying to push against, saying that ain't right, folks. And that's what Liberty Valance did. But I want you to talk
Well, it's
about,
like, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yes.
that's exactly right, and that's kind of showing that we've been manipulated all this time.
And still are.
Quick question before we, and it's be very quick. Has Jimmy Stewart ever played a villain?
Not that I can recall.
Not that I recall, no.
No, I mean Henry Fonda certainly did, because he was
Right,
very similar to that. If you've ever seen Once Upon a Time in the West,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
one of the greatest westerns ever done. He plays a villainous villain. I mean, he's awful.
Oh,
Frank
what was
is guy's
the?
name.
Oh gosh,
Well, in Fort Apache, he's the villain. He's
Jimmy Stewart and Henry Fonda. The comedy that they were in, the Western comedy, it was semi dramedy, they would call it nowadays, where Jimmy Stewart inherits the whorehouse.
Oh,
That one I don't
Jimmy
recall.
Stewart.
Yeah. He inherits a whorehouse.
that one I don't remember.
Um,
I'm sorry.
What's her name? Oh shoot, the mom from the Partridge Family.
Shirley Jones.
Shirley
Shirley
Jones.
Jones.
She's in it. She's the madam.
Oh,
And she falls in love with Jimmy
You have
Stewart.
destroyed my
Yes,
entire
yes,
childhood
yes.
with 2 sentences.
No, yes, Shirley Jones played the madam of the whorehouse. Yes.
Yes.
All right, well,
I mean, it was a fantastic. It was so much fun. I saw that as a kid so many times,
I
and it was
think,
just
I think the
fantastic.
Imperator's looking it up.
Yeah, well, I was checking, and he's played a villain a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He played a murderer in After the Thin Man.
Oh, I didn't know.
Oh.
that. Okay. Yeah.
I'm surprised I didn't recall that because I love the Thin Man
And
movies.
he did quite a few other ones.
Okay. So find the Western, because I didn't mean to derail Martin's comment.
No,
okay.
the other big landmark
I
film.
want you to talk about this because this is a great movie.
yeah,
It's one of your favorites.
One of my favorites is Mr. Roberts.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Is set in the Pacific in World War II. Henry Fonda plays Lieutenant J.G. Douglas Roberts. He is the exec and cargo officer on a ship the crew just calls the Bucket.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. They deliver cargo to other ships. But it is summer of 45, or spring and summer of 45. The war is nearing an end, and he wants a combat role. But his commander, lieutenant, they have to call, of course, captain, because he is commander of the boat.
Right.
His captain is played by James Cagney, and he is an ex-merchant marine. He's like a 45-year-old lieutenant in the Navy.
That was not uncommon.
Yeah.
So, but he wants to make lieutenant commander, and the admiral told him he's got a good cargo officer, keep him at it. So he's not letting Doug Roberts go anywhere. He's not letting Mr. Roberts go anyplace, no matter how many times he applies for a transfer to a combat assignment.
Right, because how can you go home from the war and say you were not part of any battle?
You're just you were just a cargo guy.
Yeah.
You shivered ship.
You were the teamster,
Yeah.
basically.
So and of course not Tony Randall, Jack Lemmon. Jack Lemmon plays Ensign Pulver, a lecherous junior officer, and William Powell in one of his last film roles, or the last film role, plays Doc, who's probably just like a pharmacist mate,
Right.
not an
Right.
actual
Oh, yes.
doctor.
Because
They would have a real doctor. But like Ward Bond, Ken Curtis, a lot of Ford stock people are
Right.
in it. And it's just this story of this, this tension between this combat between the two of them. And it's hysterical. It's a great comedy film.
it is.
And, the story about Ford, yes, he starts out as the director, but ends up punching Henry Fonda.
Yeah, I'm
They
glad
get
you
into
I
a
wanna
fight, and he literally punches Henry Fonda. And James Cagney says, basically, you said when we started this, we're going to tangle asses. Well, we're going to tangle.
Yeah, well,
Right,
Fonda
but he-
himself talked about this later,
Yeah.
and what it was, Fonda at this point. And let me give you a little context. Ford at this point here is in full blown alcoholism.
Oh, yeah.
He was an alcoholic all along, but he never drank on set. But
Right,
by the
for
time-
years and years and years,
That's right.
he would finish a picture, go sit in a room in a blanket,
Yeah, and have a bender.
and just drink until he couldn't see straight, and then, okay, now I'm all right, and come out of it. But now he's drinking heavily.
Yeah.
And this is 55, I think, something like that, 58.
Yeah, it's
And-
ironic. It's right before the Searchers, actually.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
And so he
and-
gets in a big fight with Ford, and he gets pulled off the set to have gallbladder surgery,
Yeah,
and Mervyn Leroy replaces him and finishes the film. But it's Mr. Roberts is just a great film.
and Henry Fonda. The reason that a lot of this came to blows is because nobody ever questioned John Ford on set. Nobody. John Wayne deferred to him. Henry Fonda had worked with him 8 times prior to this,
Yeah.
and they were close friends. Fonda himself would say later, "I loved that man," and he says, "But what happened there? Our friendship never recovered."
Yeah.
And Fonda himself would never see Ford again to speak of, although he did attend his funeral. But they would never because he really pushed, because Fonda was pushing for. Fonda had played the role on stage
On
for
stage,
3 years
And knew it
and
inside
knew the
out.
role very well. And Ford was making some decisions. Fonda questions, says that's not the way this movie has to be done. It's not the way, and that's what ultimately Ford calls him in and to talk about it, and he bushwhacks him essentially. And
Well, I got to say, they were both in the wrong. You
Yeah.
you don't question the director. He's got. I mean, yes,
especially John Ford. I mean,
Well, I mean,
he
you
knows his
can-
business.
you can question. It's like, hey, you can add, now, and maybe he didn't like this, even that, but you can say, well, why are we doing this? What's going on? Because my take on this character, because if it becomes your character,
And that's right. And that's they were both in the.
yeah, but him punching him, yeah, that's wrong too. So
And they finished the picture. They did finish the filming, and every shot afterwards, Ford was supposed to say to Fonda, he says, "You okay with that? Is that all right? Did you like that?"
that's probably the thing that killed.
That's
the,
correct. That's right.
The
Because
friendship, yeah.
now,
Because usually guys, they get into a fight, they're best friends forever afterwards after they make up. But-
Ford was really, really a dirty dog on that one.
Yeah, you keep
And
digging.
He did apologize for punching Fonda,
Yeah.
but their friendship never recovered.
he was-
Even though the movie did not suffer, if you watch the movie, it is still a
You
fantastic.
can't
it is.
really tell.
I tell you what, that is a
You know,
great movie. If
who-
for no other reason, getting all of those actors together on one screen.
That's right.
Mhm. I mean,
I
Absolutely.
mean, James Cagney and Henry Fonda together.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, and this is.
I
this
mean,
is-
Cagney can choose some scenes. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, William
amazing.
Powell. I mean,
Yeah.
he is one of my all-time favorites from the black and white era. You know,
Yeah.
he is just fun. Him and Myrna Loy together are
man,
gold.
Absolutely, yeah.
They are comedy gold.
And it's just kind of amazing. But I'm glad we're ending
Yeah.
with that.
Can I just tell my favorite scene of Mr. Roberts?
Please go right ahead as we finish up.
Yeah, we'll finish it. But where they make scotch
Yes.
for Ensign Pulver.
Mhm.
Ensign Pulver, again, the lecherous junior officer has invited a nurse onto the ship, and because she thinks he has a bottle of scotch, but Mr. Roberts gave the scotch away to get the ship assigned to a Liberty port,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and so they have to make scotch for Ensign Pulver to give this nurse. And it's great.
Well, I wanted to give you plenty of space to do that because Mr. Roberts is one of your absolute favorites.
Oh, it's absolute favorite.
Oh,
Yeah.
it is. You know,
It is. I mean, Fort Apache is certainly one of
Yeah.
mine. And before we end, is there any other movie that you guys have had a chance from a John Ford era that you
Well,
want to speak of?
I was going to refer to.
Oh, you found the-
yes, and I'd forgotten about that one too. The Cheyenne
Social Club.
1970.
Cheyenne Social Club. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
All right.
Yes. Yes, it was later in their careers. This was not an early.
Right.
This is one of the last big westerns that, I mean, big, in quote marks.
Right
but-
around the same time as Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid.
And
Yeah.
you, much like you, I mean, John Ford was I mean, he was consummate womanizer, alcoholic,
Yep.
asshole,
Yep.
but an excellent visionary and director.
Correct.
Most of your flawed human being, you know, if the creatives, the great creatives, are all flawed. in some
Well,
way or
everybody
another.
is
Well, we all
Everybody's
are.
flawed.
We're all
But
fallen
he
creatures.
you know, with great flaws
Come
come
great-
great,
can come
great
great things.
achievements, and that's
That-
kind of
well,
where we,
to be theological, but from great flaws comes great redemption.
Well, there's that.
yeah.
The question is whether or not a lot of the people in Hollywood actually get redemption.
And one of John Wayne, for example, one of his later films, McClintock,
Yes.
was very different. Although there still was the drunk Indian, but the view towards the natives.
Right. John
was-
Wayne's very
John Wayne's
protective.
very protective and defensive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
he-
you talk to Sitting Buffalo that way again, I'll kill you.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Yeah. And some of
Uh,
this was
and-
very ahead of the time.
It was.
Yeah, and he was very. Wayne was an actor's actor in
Mhm.
many ways. He always protected everyone that was on set with
He
him,
did.
and he wouldn't tolerate any shenanigans and stuff like that. And the extras were very much included in that.
And one of my favorite restaurants is one of John Wayne's favorite restaurants.
Which
McDonald's?
In Seattle. No, Canlis. In Seattle, it's up over Lake Union,
yeah.
and his seat is still reserved there.
Oh wow!
And he had a phone there, and I've eaten in his seat.
Isn't that something? I didn't know that.
But
That's
a
fan-
wonderful
I
restaurant.
wish Cajun was here because he's our resident John Wayne expert.
Yes.
But I'll end with this. We do need to have the Duke bourbon featured here.
Okay.
Didn't we have that at his
I
place?
Don't think we did.
I thought we did.
Maybe we did, and if we did, well, we just need to bring it back.
Yeah,
because-
We just
either-
need to drink
I've
Cajun's
drank it
bourbon.
there.
Right,
I don't
but
know if we
thought
did it on
at Bourbon Fest, the first Bourbon Fest as a group that we did,
and maybe
I thought we had it then.
and it's worth bringing back because I thought
I
it was
mean,
very
I don't
good.
remember having it specifically, but I'm pretty sure we talked about it, and I thought somebody had
Yeah.
had it
It's
on the show.
for all our bourbon lovers out there, which is all of our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Duke, John Wayne Estate has authorized this bourbon. I have drank it,
Yes.
and
it's
it was
not a
excellent.
Kentucky bourbon, so
No,
it's
it's not.
small B.
Yeah, but it's it was excellent. At one point, we will feature it
We need
on
to
the
pass a
show.
law for that.
They should,
They
yes.
should.
Thanks,
Okay.
guys, for working with me on this one here. I know
Yeah,
it was.
we did a good job. An hour and a half of.
He's the
thank
guy
you.
that's got a hard stop, and it's still, as the captain, looking at the clock, he still goes an hour 30.
Well, no, I expected that. Yeah, I expected about hour and a half was about right. Thanks again once.
yes, our
forever.
listeners may not
Thank
agree.
you all.
What is next, Francis?
Well, we're here at Studio M. So Martin gets to captain this next episode. It's going to be Code of Honor again, And he hasn't told us what his quotation is, but you all listeners, longtime listeners,
Well,
know.
I'll drop a name.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Max Weber.
Max Weber?
Yes.
Okay, Max Weber. Okay, we've not done
With
a
a W.
Mm-hmm.
W. Okay, but it's
Pronouncing it German style.
I was doing German. That's how I say. Interesting. Well, we're going to hear from what Martin has to say and about the wisdom of Max Weber in our next episode, our Code of Honor episode. You guys know we take these quotations and we go deep with them. So be here next episode. It's going to be great.
We hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern, just in time for your morning commute. And every fifth Friday, we drop a special Hoopajube episode. Spread the word we are on all the major platforms, and leave us a review. That helps others find us. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com. Join us next time. Same snake time, same otter channel.